How do you win your race?
Knock on doors.
How many doors do you got to knock?
All of them.
All the time, doors, doors, doors. And we say this, and we generally accept that you guys like agree and accept that because you hear it so much. It's probably just like, you know, the world is not flat. You need to knock doors. But there is actually a reason behind it, and I can talk a bit about that. But door knocking, does anyone have a guess why it's so effective?
Face to face.
One-on-one.
Face to face, one-on-one. Why does that matter? Why does it matter that you're face to face with someone?
It makes personal connection.
Yeah, they hear you.
We're human beings. Like, we were meant to talk face to face. Phones and mail, that's all stuff we've come up with, but naturally we talk one-on-one. What are other reasons?
Trying to make a first impression of a person you haven't made eye contact with.
Mm-hmm.
I think political decisions are very emotional, so once you like have that footprint with somebody, like talk to them.
And the majority of human communication, it's not verbal always. You know, how I'm standing right now says something about me. That I'm standing, you guys are sitting, that says something. On a phone, you can kind of do that, but not really.
Different people retain information differently. So for some people are visual, some people are audio. Some people can read things and remember that. So you want to adhere to as many options as possible.
Can anyone guess? Oh, Terry.
Trust.
Trust. Yeah. Can anyone guess what the number one indicator is of whether you're going to persuade someone or whether they're going to vote for you?
Eye contact. First 5 seconds.
Not quite. So it's whether they respond to you. So part of why doors are so effective is it creates a conversation. So I talk to you, you talk to me, we go back and forth, you have questions you ask, and every other means of communication we have is less likely to create a conversation. Piece of mail, can you have a conversation with a piece of paper? You can, it's weird, but you could do it, but it's not common. On a phone, many of you have done phone calls. It's harder to keep people there, it's harder to engage, and people tend to be meaner because you can hang up on somebody and be done. On a door, like yes, you can slam a door, but it's rude, and it's in their face, and it's worse. Does that make sense to everybody? Sure. Yeah. Okay. So this is an old quote. They've been doing door knocking since Lincoln's days. I kind of suspect they were probably better at it because there was like 2 doors, but it's a good example. So this is a common question. Whenever I'm chasing a candidate, asking them, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Because it's miserable sometimes, because it's cold and you're out knocking doors. You do this because mail and everything else is just a means of communicating with voters. Doors are incredible because you're just directly communicating with voters. Now, I like to believe, or I don't like to believe, but it's true, there is a lot of bullshit in politics. And that is true. We all believe things because someone told us at some point that it's true. You know, like tax cuts are wildly popular. How many people believe that tax cuts are popular? Show of hands. It's normal. That makes perfect sense. Do you think raising taxes on the rich is more or less popular than cutting taxes for everybody? How many think it's more popular? How many do you think it's less popular? So it is actually significantly less popular to cut taxes than it is to raise them on the rich. Over 80% of Rhode Islanders support raising taxes on the rich. About 60% support cutting like the sales tax or other ones. We wouldn't naturally know that. That doesn't sound right. It doesn't fit the narrative we've been sold. Now, how many of you think your neighbors are conservative? Like your community is generally a conservative place. Where do you live?
I live in Richmond, Rhode Island.
Okay, you may be right. Other guys.
We have a lot of conservative people.
How many of you think you live in a progressive community?
I think it's pretty split.
Nick, you're Providence?
Yeah.
Your neighborhood, do you think it's progressive?
Less so than neighboring neighborhoods, but yeah.
And how many of you think you live in kind of moderate, middle of the road community? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now the truth is, in general, people overstate how conservative their community is. They overstate how popular tax things are. And the truth is we do that because we depend on the media and we depend on other ways to tell us the truth of the world. But the beauty of doors is there's no bullshit. Like if you believe you're a convincing candidate and your message works, there's one really easy way to figure that out. Go ask people and go talk to people. And that's what doors are all about. Testing whether what you're saying is full of shit. And you can very, very, very fast figure that out on doors because you'll get responses back. And that can be scary because you're testing your message, you're testing whether people like you, but also it's great because you're not flying blind. You go, you knock a door, someone says they support you, you know that. It's not like, did that mail piece work? Did this phone call work? It's right there. Don?
Last question, if you're going to answer this later, let me know.
if you're testing a message,
Mhm.
on your list, where should you test it that if it's really wrong, it has the least amount of impact?
What do you mean? So just clarify.
Like which doors to knock on? Are you gonna go after Democrats to test your message who have voted Democratic in every election?
You're gonna go on after the people whose votes you need.
Yeah.
So whoever you're trying to get.
So whoever you're trying to influence becomes
Who's ever in
you're
that
gonna do your
influence
test
box,
there.
that's where you do your test.
This is my dog, who's apparently made a bad break for it. Also, common experience knocking doors, getting harassed by a dog. So get ready for that.
That's part of that.
Okay, so that's just kind of a basic primer. Now today, what we're going to go through are the pieces of a good door conversation, why we have conversations on doors, and then we're actually going to get up and do an exercise, and you'll be knocking on my door, telling me, to vote for you. Okay? Oh, this is just verification. So often we say believe in doors. We've done studies. Doors are actually incredibly more impactful than phone calls, than mail. And in politics, there's a lot of kind of like guesswork a lot of the time, as you've seen with the math. Some of it's just putting your finger on the thumb. Doors are not. Doors have consistently been shown to be incredibly impactful to turn out voters, to persuade voters, to educate voters. In political science, like the only thing we know for sure is talking face to face on doors works, and it works all the time. All right, what are we trying to accomplish when we canvass? Show of hands. Mel.
Get people to commit to voting for us.
Yes, that's correct.
Identify our supporters.
We want to identify supporters. What else?
Communicate your message.
You want to get your message across. Other hands. Tony.
You want to make sure that people know who you are, that they're impressed with you, and hopefully tell their friends.
Mhm. These are all correct answers. We think of it 3 different ways. So persuasion is you go to a door, that person's undecided. You talk to them and you say, will you vote for me? And you have a conversation. You talk about these are the issues I believe in, these are the values I have, this is my life story. And your goal from that conversation is to say, oh, I'll definitely vote for you. Terry, that sounds great. I would love to support you in November. Mobilization is you knock on a door, you know they support you. They said 2 weeks ago that there were 1. And you're saying, you got to go out and vote. You got to get out there or we're going to lose. Because not everyone you identify will vote or know how to vote. It's also about getting your people who are super supportive to go become activists for you, to go out and knock doors. And then education is tricky. You don't do it too much in campaigns. But it's me knocking doors and talking about earned sick days. It's telling people about the issues and pulling them along. On campaigns, you don't do a lot of education. You do that mostly for issues and to build power kind of over the long term. Questions about the split? Which one of these do you think you spend most of your time doing as a candidate?
Persuasion.
Mobilization.
As a candidate, oh, back.
Why is this called canvassing? It's
I actually don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, we just call it canvassing ever since I started. Do you know why it's called canvassing?
For real, like,
It comes from like census canvassing. It comes from like the term for like counting and surveying. Yeah.
Huh, I didn't know
I was picturing us like covering a neighborhood with like sailcloth, but I don't think that's necessarily what that came from.
Spelled
that. I have never been asked that question before. That says something. Other questions about the split? Okay. There you go. Persuasion, mobilization, education. So when you go out,
just to answer that question, you would say that a candidate spends most of their time persuading.
yeah, and volunteers often spend a lot more of their time mobilizing rather than persuading. So, and that makes perfect sense. If I show up at your door and ask you to vote for Terry, like I can persuade you sometimes, but obviously you'd much more be persuaded by Terry. But I can show up on your vote and be a person and say, please go vote, and that makes the same impact as her telling me to go vote. And that, I think, makes logical sense to most people. And that's why when you knock doors, if it's a candidate, you'll get like a 50% ID positive on average. If it's a volunteer, you get like 35%. And the quality of ID is always better when it's the candidate talking to someone. I mean, it makes perfect sense. You have questions, you ask them. Good ID program, what do we want? So you're going out, you're knocking doors. What is ideal in those conversations? Take a guess. What are parts of a conversation
You
you
want
have
to come away with a sense of what is that person going to vote for you or where they are on the spectrum when
You want to know if they support you. You want to know if they're going to vote. Others.
What issues they care about?
What issues they care about. That's great. That's good. I will warn you, I'm kind of a hostile presenter. I will just start pointing at people and asking them to answer questions. No pressure. One more.
If they're gonna vote, like if they're gonna actually show up.
Yeah. And for the record, asking someone if they will vote increases the odds they'll vote. So. It's targeted. That's what's key. So if you go out and you knock doors, every single door doesn't really help you. You've heard this many times before, but there are a lot of non-voters. And I'm sorry to break this to you, but you're not Barack Obama. It doesn't matter how charismatic and how awesome you are, you're not Barack Obama. And there are voters who will just not be activated. And that's okay, because you don't need every vote. And another weird misconception people have is that the really strong voters, the 3-for-3s, they voted every year, there's a belief that those people are naturally conservative and that you can't convince them and that they're always going to be on the incumbent side. That's not true. I've gone to 3-for-3. Old Italian voters in the middle of Providence, been voting every year. Like you answer the door, they're like in their underwear. You're like, oh my God, my life is going to be horrible. And they've said progressive things and voted for my candidate. Don't be scared away just because they're common voters. And another weird one is don't assume new voters are your voters. People assume if it's like a first-time voter, they're going to be progressive and smart and young. That's not always true.
I mean, the Young Republicans is an organization that exists.
Yeah, and often they tend to be less engaged voters, which means they go into the ballot box, and what do you think they might do? Check the first Democrat they see. So often people think like, let's get all these new voters and they'll naturally be on my side. They might not know, and don't count on that. It has a goal. This is not my gift. I would have used hockey.
That's not you?
Yeah.
It's not the same without the goal.
Oh, there it was. I was there. You missed it.
It tracks.
No, the word.
So we have a saying on campaigns, if it's not written down, if it's not in van, it didn't happen. So I go out and I have a conversation with John here, right? And I knock on his door and I say, John, will you vote for me in September? Sure. Thank you, man. I really appreciate that. And I don't record it. How does anyone else know on this campaign why? That this occurred, this conversation happened? I mean, I might know up here, but it doesn't matter.
And you'll forget by the time you get through.
So say, yeah, if you,
Absolutely.
you're knocking on 100 doors.
And you want to be accumulating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of IDs so you can come back to these people, so you can confirm their support, so you can get them out to vote, so you can know where you're in a race. And if you don't record that data, it's pointless. And there's more than that. When you knock doors, you might discover that someone has moved. Like you don't want to send someone back out there. You might knock on the door and John tells me to go screw. And it's a refusal. You don't ever want to go back there. Always record what you're doing all the time. It's repeated. So this is a question we often get. How many times should I knock on John's door?
As many as you can.
As many as I can. So I knock on John's door, he's not home. When do I come back?
When he is home.
As soon as I can.
Yeah.
I come back again. All right, I knock on his door again, he answers the door. John, I ask you to vote for me. What are you going to say?
Maybe. I have to think about it.
So he's undecided. I haven't done a good job. That's too bad. I already lost a 1 to a 3. When should I go back to talk to John? Or should I?
Yes, you
Yes.
should.
Yeah, sure.
It depends on the
He says
response.
undecided.
So he's undecided. Should I come back to his door?
Yeah.
How long should I give him?
Week or two.
Where are we in the campaign?
We're like 2 months out from election day.
In a month.
Could you send them a note based on the conversation, and like a postcard or something, just referring to something or sending them additional information?
I'll talk about best practices kind of after a follow-up conversation a little later on. No, that's great. It's true. You should do that. But so you guys say like a month?
I want to know why is he undecided and what are the issues that he's undecided on so I can go back.
Let's assume I didn't suck in my conversation. I talked to John. I said, why are you undecided, John?
Well, I'm not sure about your position on reproductive rights.
Yeah, I'm super pro-life. That's me. So he's undecided on choice.
So he's decided now.
I'll leave now.
He has decided.
So the truth is, if he's undecided, I usually go back to a door after about 20 to 30 days, and you always want to come back and have a conversation. And sometimes just showing up again makes someone a supporter. Because part of what door knocking does is it makes you the guy or woman who showed up to their door and cared. And just the act of showing up is something people aren't used to. The majority of incumbents in Rhode Island especially have never knocked a door in their life. John DeSimone did not knock doors for 20 years. When he showed up on doors after 20 years of not knocking, people were like, who are you? Where have you been? Well, Marcia had been at those doors 4 to 5 times already, and they're like, that woman's nice. She came here beforehand. And it's very, very rare that a sitting incumbent has actually knocked doors. And so just the simple act of knocking makes you seem more engaged, more accessible, more in touch.
If you are an incumbent, sorry to interrupt. If you are an incumbent and you've knocked on doors the first time and you're knocking again, like, how do you like address that? I don't know. Is it like, because I'm probably going to knock on doors that I didn't knock on last time, so I'm going to have more people this time.
Yeah.
So how do I address like, well, I didn't actually knock on your door last time, but I did knock on some people's, I just didn't knock on yours.
Nobody knows what the expectations are, so they'll be delighted to see you. They'll be like, "Oh, you are actually my city councilor." Yeah, it's probably how those conversations will go.
Yeah, and I will also say, if you're ever out knocking doors and someone's off your list and like they're giving you that weird look, you know what I mean? You're in the yard beside them and you knock and they're over there.
That happens all the time. I never know what to do. It's so awkward.
I always just wave and say hi and say I was going to that person's door today, but I was going to come back for them and I'd love to have a conversation. It's a lie, but it's a good that's one of those weird scenarios that you just have to lean into. Another weird one is you knock on a door and you're looking for one of them, not both. Like I knock on the door, I'm like, hey, is Mary home? And it's John. And like John is really offended because he thinks I'm having an affair with his wife. And I'm really bad at it and just showed up and asked me. Don't try and fumble around. Just tell them why you're there. Tell them that, you know, your records must not be perfect, but I'd love to talk to you, John. Like just engage with people. I know people who will say like, is Mary home? And John will be like, she is. What can I ask? You're like, I really want to talk to Mary. That's weird, guys.
So how do you engage in that, beyond that, where the weirdness is? Just say she's a
I have Mary on my list, but I'd love to talk to you too.
I just go right into my rap.
Sometimes their friggin' spouse isn't even registered.
Yeah.
Who they are, why
Or
they
they
are.
really don't want Mary to come to the door because they really don't want her to vote Democratic.
Oh yeah, this is a side note, but when husbands tell you how their wives are voting, it's like 100% shit. Like every time. When wives tell you how their husbands are voting, it's actually usually true, but it's never true the other way. The number of houses when I worked for Obama, I would knock, and they'd be like, my wife's voting Republican, and she'd be in the back and go, all right, so I knocked.
You mentioned the person in the next door yard mowing their lawn or whatever. I used to talk to everybody because you just never know. As it is, it's the personal contact, connecting people that causes them to vote for you. So maybe they're just happy that if they're not going to vote for you if they get the sense that you're not talking to them because of some preconceived notion you have about them.
How I think about it is this: you should not knock every door, but there's no wrong. It's fine. If someone's out on their lawn, you want to have a conversation. That's good. That's fine. That's not wasting too much time because you're just going by and you know they're there. What gets ridiculous is when you start knocking every door. When only like 1 out of every 10 is actually going to vote in your primary election or is even a voter, and then so much time is wasted. But people get really locked into the targeting, and they're like, I will only hit these doors and talk to these people at this time. And it's like, no, like you're a human being. You see someone else, be nice and say hi.
Right. One other detail is that I was advised to knock on the doors that had lawn signs for my opponent.
Yes.
Just to say, I see you have my opponent's lawn sign. I just want you to know that if I'm elected, I intend to represent your interests as well, and I wanted to meet you. And the thing that you find out is that often they put up the lawn sign not because they wanted to, but because the guy's their cousin and
especially in the cities, this is super, super true. I can't tell you the number of doors I knocked with DeSimone signs. And this is like my fun campaign I always talk about because it was the craziest shit we've done. You knock on these doors and you'd be like, oh, I see you're going to vote for John. And the person would be like, who's John? Why is that in my yard? Their landlord put it up. They had like a random cousin that put it up. We had one guy in that campaign who I think just started putting them up on every lawn and seeing like who would take them down. And also like just because they say they're voting for John doesn't mean they won't vote for you. Often they don't even know he has a challenger. Like don't take a yard sign as some big indicator. And also I would say don't put out your yard signs too early in a race because if I'm going against you, I'm going to each one of those houses and I'm trying to steal back votes. That's a small thing, but it's true. All right, to pull it back, I'm talking. Oh,
So when should you put them up?
Yeah.
Traditionally, I put them up about a month and a half before E-Day. And what I do is I collect commitments from people as I knock doors, say like, can I put it up when the time comes? Can I put it up when the time comes? And then you put them all up at once. And that helps. Questions? Okay, so I knocked on John's door, he's undecided. We said 20 to 30 days, we come back and talk again. Let's say I knock on your door and you're gonna vote. When should I come back? Should I come back?
The week before election day.
And that's the only time?
If it's 2 months before election day, when you're not.
I come back to every single one about 30 to 40 days after I identify it. And just so we're clear, 1 through 5, 1 is support, 2 is lean support, 3 is undecided, 4 is lean opposed, 5 is like strong for your opponent. We talk in that jargon, I just want to make sure everyone understands it. Sorry, okay.
For someone like me, I deal in a community that has like a lot of immigrants,
Mhm.
so they might just not actually be able to vote. What do you do if you run into like you knock like 5 doors in a row and you're like you just can't vote? What do you do? Like, you just
So your lists are probably quite bad at that point. So when you're going off of van lists and targeted voters, you know they're voters, you know how old they are. So hopefully you're not hitting a lot of like immigrant doors.
But if you knock on a door and did have a voter in it, but they've moved and now the family that lives there are immigrants, like they can still help. If they're excited about you running, they can still help your campaign. You know, they can volunteer.
So why would I come back to John even though he said he voted for me?
Reinforcement.
Reinforcement.
Volunteer.
Volunteer. What else we got?
Donation.
Make sure he gets out and votes.
Make sure he gets out to vote.
The other guy may have been there in between.
Keep them engaged.
These are all true. Just because somebody said one, it's not like they're ones forever. How many of you were paying? I won't even ask this. In 08, Obama won Iowa, right? It was a big, huge moment for most of us in this room. It was a big thing. And he lost New Hampshire. Does anyone know why he lost New Hampshire?
It's not because I was knocking doors, because I was.
Because he spent
I
all
was
his
up
time
there
in
twice.
Iowa.
So in New Hampshire, sorry.
I just assume racism. I've been in New Hampshire.
That's probably always
I've
true.
seen a lot of people of color up there. Like,
I feel like Iowa is probably a little more racist than New Hampshire.
do they have like people from elsewhere like working? They see people with skin pigmentation. Like I don't know about New Hampshire.
So Obama's, it's very white. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very white. Yeah.
Obama's campaign had identified more than enough voters to win in New Hampshire. They had locked them down. They felt super confident. They were bragging to the press and they were set. But what they didn't do is they didn't go back to those voters. And they didn't confirm that they were still ones. So they had IDs that had been sitting there for 60, 70 days. And like the world changes in 60 to 70 days. Maybe after I knocked on John's door and he said he's going to support me, he got a mailer saying that I'm pro-life and that like I don't believe in choice. And I'm not. I'm pro-choice as hell. But he doesn't necessarily know that, and he's changed his mind.
Because he believes the mailing.
He believes the mailer. It happens.
Or
And some of
there's
these
doubt,
mailers
right?
will be crazy.
Yeah.
Or maybe my opponent stopped in and told him a lie, or he told him the truth, and that's a problem too. You always want to go back and confirm. And that's important because oftentimes people think I have a 1 and I'm done. And if you're doing your campaign right, you're knocking for months, and you always want to be recycling.
So do you have to be the one that goes back, or can one of your staff go
No,
back?
your volunteers can do it as well. So usually on Van, which is our software, you can set it so like if a 1 turns to a 3, it like shoots up to you. So you know if you're losing voters, or if you have a 3 and it goes to a 1, you know that as well. And as a side note, as your volunteers knock, this is very common. Volunteer will knock and they'll get a 1, right? And that's great for you. You should follow up with them with a phone call or just drop in and thank them for that because it reinforces their support. Does that make sense? Sorry, Linda.
Terry's running for state rep. We're running for town council. We were hoping to help her. Does it seem odd that we're leaving literature or talking about 2 such different candidates, or even 3 or 4? I mean, how does that work when you're asking for more than one person?
So you can certainly do that. It can still be effective. As you add on asks, each one tends to kind of get worse. That's true. Like I did a Maine coordinated race. So I would go and I would ask on the door for the state rep, the state senator, the U.S. congressman, the U.S. senator, and the president. And by the time I got to Barack Obama, the person was just like, no, leave me alone. So keep that in mind. The more asks you add, the harder a conversation gets. But 2 people, totally fine. It's not weird. You just got to make sure you're engaging with the voter. Make sense?
If you engage with someone and they're on the fence, say they're between a 2 and a 3, would you then have that candidate again, especially if it's issue-based, give a personal phone call and touch to?
Yes. Yeah. No, really the candidate, volunteers, I like to think of them as kind of like, just like a sweep. They go out and they see how everyone's feeling, and they can move people like a little, and they can shift them over. But it's the candidate's job to go in with that knowledge and really start carving voters over and over and over again. Because you're the most impactful part of your race if you're doing it right. You're the most persuasive person for yourself, I hope, or there's something else going on.
Especially for volunteers who are getting this information, what would you differentiate between a 1 and a 2?
Yeah, so a 1 is I knock on your door and I say, hey, I'm Lofton Asensio, I'm running for town council. Will you vote for me in September?
So if it's a yes,
And you say yes. That's a 1. That's a lockdown. If you say, probably, that's a 2.
Okay.
If you say, yeah, I'll probably do that, 2. If you say I'm not sure, that's a 3. 4s and 5s get weird. That's more of a personal kind of thing. All right. Structure of a canvassing rap. So we call it a rap. I don't know why we do that. I call it a spiel. There's a bunch of different names for it, but it's how we talk on doors. Now, the point of a good canvassing rap is to create a conversation, not an interrogation. So this is a weird thing that people do, but as soon as you get someone in a political environment, they could be fun, they could be light, they could be a hilarious person, but they're running for office, and they show up to a door like this, and they knock on it, and they're just like, will you support me as candidate for the world? And it's weird. Good people suddenly start talking like crazy people when they get involved in politics. And that's not the point. You're a person talking to another person. And in all of these, what you should be trying to do is create a conversation. Your goal is not to get them to say, I will support you on November 6th. You want them to feel good about you and say that at the end. But volunteers and candidates often just say, I need that one. I need this conversation. It's rigid. It's strict. It's not. Just relax. Have a conversation like a goddamn normal person. So every good canvassing rap has 5 different pieces. The first piece is just introducing yourself. You'd be amazed at how often people screw this part up, and it's the weirdest thing. So you go up to a door, you knock on a door, they answer their door. What do you say first?
Hi.
There you go. You do not say, can I talk to Mary? Is Mary home? No, introduce yourself. Hey, my name's Lofton. I'm actually running for state representative. It's simple, it's clean. Some common mistakes with that, don't list your district number, I'm running for state representative district 71, or I'm running for town council, half segment. These people live in that district.
Right.
If you're in someone else's district, you've done something wrong anyway. So relax. Ask for the voter and thank them for being one. Hey, my name's Lofton Asensio. I'm actually running for state representative. Is Mary home? Oh, hey Mary. Oh, I'm really glad to talk to you today. I see that you're a really great voter. It's a good way to do it. You tell them that they're a great voter, so you reinforce that you know about their voting history. This is kind of sneaky and psychology.
I'd have people be creeped out by that.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's I see that you've really cared about your community, or you've been engaged before, or you're a good Democrat, is what I've done a bunch of times. So the truth is, most people don't understand that voting history is public.
That's what I mean.
And they lie all the time about whether they vote. They did a poll once asking people who voted in 1960 election, so Kennedy's presidential election, how many of you voted for Kennedy? So he won a razor-thin margin when he won president. 73% of voters claimed they voted for Jack Kennedy when he ran, because they lie about this stuff. But what you can do is reinforce that you kind of know their voting history, that you're stopping by because they've been engaged before. It's an important piece of this because it reminds them. Message. So, hey, my name's Lofton Asensio. I'm running for state representative. I'm really glad to be stopping in today. You got a quick second to talk, or I'd love to talk to you for a minute. And then you go into your elevator pitch. This is what you're talking about here. So it's usually 30 seconds to 45 seconds. It's kind of similar to the stump speech you all worked on before, but it's shorter and sweeter. I'm running because I'm really fed up with how things are going at the State House, and I really feel like we need government back on the side of the people, and I feel like that's why I'm in this race. It's short, it's sweet, it's not a big crazy bio piece, it's not any of that. Okay? And we're going to go into an exercise at the end of this to write these pitches for each of them. Check it. This is what's key. As you're having these conversations, you're not talking at someone. I'm not telling you about all the great things I've done, how awesome I am, and you're sitting there nodding. You need people to come back and engage with you. And good canvassers are really great at that. You ask questions which are leading. You think our streets are kind of messed up, right? There are too many potholes on Metacom, right? Metacom's crazy. I drive a Jeep and I'm flying around. Like, you know, you might ask, like, do you really feel like the State House is doing a good job right now?
Let me tell you about it.
And if they ever do say, let me tell you about it, and they're ranting, let them rant. The more they talk, the more likely you are to get that vote. Okay? Now, some things you should not do. What are the issues you care about, John?
I don't know.
Exactly. You made them feel weird because people don't sit in their homes thinking, what are my number 3 issues? What are those top 3 issues? I'm waiting for a man to show up. So when you ask them, they're like, oh, trees and shit? I don't know. And it makes them feel bad. As you're asking questions, you should always make them questions that are kind of yes or no, or like simple or rhetorical questions. Don't put a voter on the spot, even with the best of intentions, because it makes them feel like inferior somehow. Questions? Does that sound right to everybody? Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, that was a rhetorical leading question. All right. Talk about one of the issues and check in. So you show up in a door, you introduce yourself, you kind of, hint at the fact you know their voting history in a non-serial killer way. You give your little bit of a spiel and you start talking to them. Do you really feel like the State House is doing a good job, Linda?
No.
Yeah. Shocking, I know. And then from there, you can pivot and talk about an issue. So I grew up in a home where, my mother would work 80 hours a week, single mother, Portuguese mother. And I had to walk myself home from school at 8. I was cooking my own meals at 10. And I had what most people consider a full-time job at age 12. And this is a true story. So I was scrubbing pots and pans at a restaurant. That's how I grew up. And last year, when we started working on an Earned Sick Days campaign, I became really passionate about it. Because when I got sick growing up, my brother had to take care of me. And when he got sick, I took care of him. And that meant I would miss on average 28 to 30 days of school every year, which obviously harms your education, harms your future. And I just think that no kid should have to go through what I did. And if I can make a difference and change that, I'm going to. And that's why I'm out here knocking doors for that issue. It's why I went up to the State House and fought for that issue. And it's really what I feel like I can bring to the table as your representative. I understand what people have gone through in their lives. I understand what they're dealing with. You see how I used an issue, pivoted to my personal story, and took it out? That's how you can do stuff. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Now, if I knocked on your door and told you that story, you think you'd be supporting me?
Yeah.
Why?
It's a pretty good story.
It is a pretty good story. It wasn't great when I was washing pans, but now it's quite useful. Why else?
Related.
It's related.
I said no because I thought he was just going to show up and start telling the story about it.
That would be super weird. You want to take issues and take campaigns and ground them in your own personal story so people understand why you believe something, not even necessarily what you believe. So if I told you that I worked at age 12, I was walking myself home at 6, what do you know about me?
You're independent, you're strong, self-sufficient.
Resourceful.
And what do you think about my life?
It was hard.
It's hard. So you instantly understand that I understand what working people are going through because I went through it. It's all rooted in those values, and that's the stories you're telling. What you don't want to do is show up on a door and say, I'm pro-choice, I believe in a $15 minimum wage, I believe earned sick days are good, I want to seal all the potholes, I want to save the world, I don't believe in war with North Korea, and really I don't like Donald Trump. If you do this long laundry list, it's just too much. People don't think that way. They live through experiences and they understand your stories. Okay? Questions? Can we count on your vote? Last piece of every good spiel is asking directly for a vote. Not can I count on your support? Not anything else, but can I count on your vote in September? Can I count on your vote in November? So oftentimes people don't want to tell you that they don't want to vote for you. It's a little weird, right? Someone goes through their whole spiel, they show up on your door, and at the end of it, like, actually, I hate you, sir. Please leave. Very few people act that way. But you need to ask them, can I count on your vote? And the simple act of them saying, yes, I will vote for you on this day, dramatically increases the odds that they will actually follow through. All right, so to review. Show up on your door, knock. Hey, my name's Lofton Asensio. I'm running for state representative. I'm just going through and talking to some of your neighbors in the community, and I'd really love to just have a second and have a quick conversation with you. Okay. I'm running for state representative because I just feel like the State House really isn't working for us. I feel like up there, the only people who get a voice or are heard are lobbyists or these big companies, and people are struggling right here in our community, and I really want to be the voice for those people. Do you really think the State House is doing well?
No.
No. You know, I grew up right here down the road. I kind of had a hard life. When growing up, my mother was a Portuguese immigrant. We didn't have much of anything. You know, I walked myself home from school at 6. I was really cooking my own meals at 8. And at 12, I had what most people would consider a full-time job. And last year, I became really invested in the campaign to get earned sick days. And I did that because I thought no other kid should have to go through what I did. And so I knocked doors right here in the community, and I gathered cards, and I worked really hard. And I brought that stuff up to the State House to try and make a difference. And that taught me that we can win if we fight these fights, but only if we're committed and really do it. And that's what I think I can bring to the table as your state representative. I'll fight for you, and I'll fight for these issues because I've lived it. And I know what it's like to struggle, and I know what it's like to deal with problems. Can I count on your vote in September?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. There's no snarky guy in the back who's like, no, you know, I want no health care. There you go.
What do you do though, like when you ask that like semi-rhetorical question, if they're like, oh no, like I think incumbent other person is doing good, like.
You stand there terrified. No, you work with it. When I'm on doors, I don't usually trash talk an incumbent. And the truth is, even when people like their own representative, they don't tend to like the State House. It's a common problem. You know, there are people in Aaron's district, you guys saw him yesterday, who love him. You ask them what the State House is like, and they're like, oh my God, it's horrible, burn it down, salt it. They're probably right.
Can I ask you a question? When you're out canvassing for someone else, and what direction should you be given as far as your personal story of why you're running, why you're canvassing for this person? Why?
Yeah, so
because
the best
I
volunteer.
didn't get a lot of training this last session. I did some canvassing for 2 different candidates, and I didn't really get a lot of training as far as what issues that they wanted me to kind of develop personal stories for.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times that's where the awkward part would come for me, because I didn't know, you know, I'm very pro-choice, but is that something that they want me speaking to in a particular area?
You want your volunteers to be on message, so you do really want to train them and be like, look, we've done our research in this campaign, and we've decided that the best thing to focus on, you know, the best thing to focus on in this campaign is police accountability. And like, if you have a story you can tell about why that's important to you, great. Like, if not, then not. But like, but you don't actually want volunteers picking their own issues to talk about.
Okay, because that was frustrating for me as far as a first-time canvasser, not really having that direction.
Yeah, it speaks to the training piece of what we were talking about earlier with volunteers.
I have found that if someone, they're not going to say, I really don't support you, I'm in favor of your opponent. They're going to say, you know, I am trying so hard to get these leaves raked up. I'm sure that I'll be voting. Thank you very much for stopping by. And they're really nice and cordial, but they're not, you know, as the candidate, I would say a 4 on that one. And how, you know, what level of training do you give to the volunteers when they're going out to try to read these cues where the person at the door doesn't want to take the time and the emotional effort to explain why they're voting against you, but they are just busy.
They're reflecting on the campaign, these people who are out on your behalf.
So on the end of a campaign, Marcia Rankin-Bassett, right? She won. It was a close election. When we had our IDs back, it was about 60% of people we talked to were in support. It got up to 70 by the end there. And then there was like 35 who were undecided, and we have like 8 to 9% who voted for John DeSimone. Obviously, those are not real numbers because John DeSimone was almost tied with Marcia. The truth is people lie and they say they're undecided when they're not.
Yeah.
But a campaign shouldn't be making assumptions about people. If I knock on the door and that woman's, you know, raking her leaves, there is a chance that she's just raking her leaves and has had a shit day.
Right.
And so I mark those down as 3s, or I put them as a not home if they want to have a conversation. And if you go back again, you tend to figure out pretty fast. But you don't want, like, I've had volunteers who like look at someone and they're like, oh, they look pretty liberal, that's a 1. And like, that's not a 1, man. Or like, you show up and they have a pickup truck and you're like, that's a 5. It's not how it works. When you're going through them, 1 is I will vote for you. 2 is I will probably vote for you. 3 is I don't know. I'm undecided. I can't figure it out. I'm lost. Where am I? 4 is, I don't really kind of like those people. Like, I don't usually support Democrats, that kind of stuff. 5 is, I'm voting for John. Sorry.
But you will get a lot of people who say they're undecided who end up voting for your opponent. That's fine. That's why we don't turn out the undecideds when it comes to GOTV.
Yeah.
But you still mark them as a 3. Basically, you trust what people say in terms of what you mark down. You don't try to make it some sort of like special psychological evaluation.
Yeah.
And that makes, but it's very important to train volunteers that way,
Yeah.
that you trust, you listen to what people say, and that's what you mark down.
And you're getting a firm commitment before you say a 1.
Yeah.
Not just someone.
Yeah, I hope you'll vote for me. The answer to that question is, it's not a question, but.
Also, nods don't count. This is a weird one, but when you say, will you vote for me? And they're like, that's not actually a yes. That's
What
like
is
an
that?
involuntary reaction people do with
That's
their
like
hands.
Is that a 3?
It's like I heard you.
3, or you're gonna ask the question again?
I ask it again. You know what I mean? Yeah, like, do you know your election day, that kind of stuff, you lean in. But the nod, like a lot of people just nod when they're talking in conversations.
Right.
It doesn't actually mean, I nod when I see a stranger on the street. Like, I'm not supporting them. I'm just trying not to have them stab me. That's it. Sorry, you had a question.
You kind of answered it. I mean, I guess part of what I was wondering is whether people tend to be dishonest in saying, I support you, or I'll probably support you, as much as they're dishonest when they don't want to tell you that they don't support you. And it sounds like they tend to be more honest in saying yes
the
than
yeses
no.
are much more real than the undecideds are.
And
especially because you're asking it as, can I count on your vote? So it's very easy for someone to be like, oh, I don't know. You're asking, if you ask specifically for the thing that you actually want, people are pretty real about their commitments. Now, they could change their minds, but.
People who say they're voting for you and voting against you are usually telling the truth. Like, in very rare exceptions is that not true. People who say they're going to vote, that's a different question. That's a harder one to figure out, but it's a campaign's job to get them to vote. But people don't tend to lie that way. You had a question.
So with your volunteers who are canvassing for you, you suggest you have a script written up for them?
Absolutely, yeah.
And if they're undecided, maybe would you like the candidate to reach out as part of that conversation?
And you should always mark it and then have a candidate follow up. Good campaigns are always doing that.
Do you train them to not be like, hello, my name is Jamie, I am, like, how do you break them up?
I am a representative of the United States government. Yeah, no. Every good campaign should, train their volunteers on the script. They should walk them through. They should do a mock conversation. They should tell them about the codes. You should be clear about a 1 is, and a 2 is, and a 3 is, and 4 is, and 5 is. Because over the years, people have, invented their own internal scale of 1 through 5.
I did mine accidentally backwards last time.
That's okay.
That's okay.
It used to be some states did that, and now it's all standardized.
Yeah, Obama did wonders.
I've seen a lot of really bad canvassers.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you, whether you actually ask people to not do it anymore if they're bad.
I mean, you don't straight up do that, but I've
worse
certainly directed people to other activities on the campaign.
So it's not worse to have fewer people door knocking if they're not that good, then it's actually worse to have them out door knocking.
I mean, I think the scale of not good, someone showing up and asking you to vote for someone is still more impactful, even if they're a mess, you know what I mean, than a lot of other stuff. I would say when you have a bad canvasser, and they exist, it depends on the variety of bad. There's the scared, awkward bad, which is actually not that rough. That's still helpful. There is the angry, yelly bad. Get that off the doors. I had one volunteer on Obama who would show up on doors and do this. Who are you voting for? And I'm like, go home, Ryan. It's too much. And they are out there. You do not want that. You do not want your volunteers arguing with voters. That's the most common thing. So other questions?
Can you role play if you come to my door and I say, gee, I really like your opponent? Can you role play how you as the candidate would respond to that?
So I would say it depends on what part of the campaign. Let me think about it. Do this. So if I knock on your door and I say, I'm running against John. John's been your state representative for years. I'm going to assume he's conservative because it's us. And I say, what do you think of John? What would you say?
I like John. He's a friend of mine.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm really just trying to get up there and kind of change stuff at the State House, and I appreciate your time today. Do you agree with me on these issues? And I would try and find a contrast with John. So if I know he's pro-life and you're pro-choice, I would probably talk about that a bit. I would try and find that connection. A good race example of this is Maura Walsh and Tom Pelangio. So we would knock doors, as some people would know Tom. He was the incumbent. We had a very bad kind of run of things trying to contact him for issue campaigns. And so she would say, like, oh, I understand that. I don't think Tom's a bad guy. I just think, like, he's not as engaged as he should be anymore. Like, I tried calling him 10 times. I tried smoke signaling the guy about an issue, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And I tried and tried and tried. And I've talked to your neighbors, and they had a similar experience. And to me, it's not whether this guy's a bad guy or a good guy. That's not the point. It's whether he's throwing everything he has at this job and is really trying. And you want to make arguments that maybe aren't so personal, like this guy's an asshole. It's much more like, I think I could do a better job. These are my strengths versus his.
Here's the situation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of votes went down this year, this session, on one day, right? And in Terry's case, her representative, which is going to be her opponent, was not there on that day. So if you're knocking doors, would that be something that strategically you would find a way to bring up?
That's
or
when
not?
they had to come back.
Yeah. And also, like, you.
So there's some
I mean, it
major
depends
bills
on-
that went down that he did not vote
It
for.
depends on what you come up with in your messaging box, right? Like, there are probably going to be a bunch of bad things about all your opponents. You are not going to talk about all of them, or even like remind people or imply all of them. Just the ones that create like whatever the core contrast is going to be of your message.
And this is an interesting thing too. If someone says they're supporting you, like, don't say a negative at all. I've seen candidates do this where someone said, like, oh yeah, I'll vote for you, and they still proceed to shit talk the incumbent. And I'm like, you won. Go home. Like, move on.
Wait, well, you're ahead.
But the other thing is, Terry, some people are going to vote for your incumbent. So if somebody, are going to vote for the other candidate, and you don't need every vote. So if somebody's like, oh, he's my cousin, I'm definitely voting for him. Like,
I wouldn't go.
then
yeah.
just say, thanks for your time, and walk away.
Yeah.
Because you could, remember, it's what else you could be doing with your time other than having that conversation.
Absolutely. But I will say, I've had people who are like, oh, he's a really sweet guy. And you flip that by making the argument that he may be sweet, but like I think he's out of touch with his district right now. Or he may be sweet, but like I had a really hard time getting a hold of him for this issue. And more often than not, if you had that issue, many other people have. I find it very rare where a state representative won't call certain people back. Usually they have a tendency to not call anybody back. Okay. So I said at the start of this, a large portion of communication is not just the words you're saying, it's how you say it. These are some common mistakes that occur. You knock on a door, and I'm a fast talker. I'm from Rhode Island, I'm native, this is how I speak. But people go, hey, my name's Lafayette DeCenzio, I'm really here knocking to be state representative. You want to talk calmly and slowly and clearly. Not like Eeyore, but pretty close. Don't be robotic. This is another weird one. People go through the bits of their script and they don't respond to someone in a conversation. They're not trying to find a way to connect. That's the quickest way to make yourself look like a weirdo. Talk slowly, talk calmly, use your hands. These are all good things. Keep it short and simple. Don't ramble on. People do not have all day to deal with these things. Just give your pitch, don't run on. And if they're not responding to you and you keep talking, that's a pretty good indicator that you should stop talking. Body language. This is the big one. Body language is interesting because once you get in a political space, you're thinking all about what you're saying, right? But that's only a small part of it. You go up to a door, don't stand there like this, don't be rigid, don't pound on a door, just look normal, look relaxed, have a calm conversation, make sure you keep eye contact, smile, and really engage that way. Words are just one part of this communication. Now, another interesting note. When you knock on the door, do not stand up against the door like this. What that body language says is, I'm going to kill you. Take 2 steps back. If you're on stairs, do the same thing, and give them that space. On campusing, we actually teach women to take 1.5 steps back, and we teach men to take 2. I think you probably guessed why.
Can I add to, just from experience, don't even bother with the doorbell in a lot of places. It probably doesn't work.
Yeah, especially in cities. You get out to the suburbs, they're a little better.
But if I don't hear the doorbell ring or hear a dog start barking, I'm going to follow up immediately with an actual knock.
Yeah, and it's 3 knocks. I had a friend once who would do like a friendly knock, like a thing. He's gone. When they open the door, they're going to be really disappointed that it's not their cousin, it's just you. Open stance makes perfect sense.
Wait.
All right.
Go back.
Oh, the open stance.
I had to be talking about Mel again.
Go back to that.
I had to see that.
What is that?
So I did not make these slides, but that is adorable. I will say.
That's not you.
This is not me.
Don't do that to
Okay.
your cat.
So, do we have the handouts?
I have a question before we go into campaign, just about the campaign. What are the safety considerations for sending people out on campaigns? Do you have your volunteers sign waivers? Like, how does that work?
No. Sorry, one sec. We are still doing more canvassing stuff. So don't
Oh,
worry.
okay, sorry. I thought because the next slide was like something.
Yeah, there's a handout here. I'm just
I
trying
mean,
to.
safety concerns for volunteers?
Yeah.
No, we don't have them sign waivers. I think most people are safe knocking on doors in most places, but people should be aware of their own, sort of safety concerns. Sometimes I try not to send two people to a door, but sometimes I will send people, especially if they're nervous about it, out in, and it obviously depends on the neighborhood, like out in pairs so that they're keeping track of each other. But look, I mean, I've knocked on doors in a dozen states in every kind of neighborhood, and I don't know, I don't worry about it.
I've had one actual bad experience in over 100,000 doors.
Right. I mean, might that be different if you're a person of color? I just feel like as a white person, like I can knock on anyone's door and they're just going to be fine with me, but like I could imagine that it would be much more scary or dangerous to be a person of color walking around in a neighborhood knocking on people's door. And
You're certainly more likely to get yelled at.
Like if I send like a black dude to the 5th Ward of Newport, people are gonna be calling cops on him.
Yeah.
I will. You definitely pick where you send your canvassers based on the kind of reception.
I'm not endorsing that.
That you think.
Yeah,
that you think you're.
No, that does suck. That's really.
Yeah, it's totally real. And look, and sometimes sometimes you also have somebody, I have a white kid with dreadlocks, right? Like, I'm gonna send him to like a neighborhood where that's not gonna seem quite so weird, right? Like, so it's. I don't know. There's nothing particularly strange about like trying to make the experience for your canvassers as comfortable as possible. Honestly, like they probably have a really good sense, and you can say like, we have these couple of neighborhoods. Do you have a preference?
Also, especially with canvassers who are people of color, like I call the cops in advance if it's a neighborhood that's not primarily. And I say we have canvassers going out. You might hear some complaints. Just understand it's just us. And that mitigates the problem a lot of the time. Because these cops show up and
It's more
things
the cops
escalate
than
stupidly because they suck. But if they have a warning, they don't have an excuse, which can help a lot of the time.
Yeah, I helped on the mayoral campaign in Central Falls, and what they did is when it became nighttime, they actually, when women were going out, they sent them 2 at a time, or with a male. So during the day, they let them go and canvass by themselves, but as soon as it became dark out, that's what they did.
Yeah, and I mean, I would trust your canvassers because, anybody who's a woman, who's a person of color, like, they've been living that way their whole lives, and they probably have a good sense of where they feel safe and where they don't. So, like, if somebody says, I don't feel safe doing that, offer them to either go to a different neighborhood or offer them a buddy. Those are 2 different things you can do. And I would check in with your canvassers, especially if they're new canvassers, and make sure they know how to get in touch with you if something weird happens.
Yeah, and clipboards and buttons and stuff act kind of like a shield.
Yeah, like a buffer.
Because the snap look at you, they see, oh, you have an Obama button, you have a clipboard, like they can figure it out. So even today, where we use phones for a lot of our canvassing stuff, I always have people with clipboards, and I clip the phone in my clipboard so they can tell what I'm doing, and they're just working off of it. Mel.
I feel like, if I'm sending volunteers to knock on doors, I would tell them in their training, under no circumstances, go into anybody's house. If they're a friendly old lady who wants to give you tea, just don't go in. Don't go in for any reason. Just say, my boss told me I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people not to do that, but for another reason that we haven't quite talked about is, like, you don't want these conversations taking 20 minutes apiece, right? So, I mean, again, it's up to your volunteers are grown-up people. It's a different story maybe if you have, like, high school kids, but, they are responsible for their own selves, and they probably make pretty good judgments about where they're safe and where they're not, and they probably know more about it than you do. But, yeah, like, these don't need to be long conversations. You don't need to go into people's houses.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen much. I've knocked on thousands of doors. I don't think I remember anybody saying, "Hey, come on in."
Oh, it's different when you're a woman. They do
Yeah.
it all the time.
Do they?
So probably 1 out of 10 people ask me if I wanted to come in.
Wow.
So I will say old ladies really seem to want me to come into their house. I don't feel particularly threatened, I just don't want to, but it is an experience you go through.
Geez, now I feel bad.
Somebody thought me. It's not likable, Tony. Michael.
Depends on where also population density. Like if you're in like a more rural area, like people ask you in more because somebody just coming to their door is more of a thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. So the last thing I'll say before we switch to the actual worksheet and we start building these raps and then role playing them is when you start out, you're gonna be bad, and like that's okay. It's weird, it's awkward. You're wandering around streets, you're talking to people. I have knocked well over 100,000 doors. The very first door I ever knocked was for gay marriage. So I was in Maine. I was working on Equality Maine, trying to legalize gay marriage and put it on the ballot. And I was in northern Maine. And the joke is you go so far north it becomes south. Up there, it's not like friendly fisherman Maine. It's like Dixie Maine. It gets weird.
It's Appalachia.
So I had signed up with Equality Maine, and I was all fired up. I was all excited. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go convince people that people are people, because that's something we have to do. I drove up there. I go down this long driveway. I get out. I got my clipboard, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm Bobby Kennedy reborn. I'm walking up. I knock on the door. I take my 2 steps back. I was well trained. And I look to the right, and there's a big old Confederate flag. Guy opens the door in a wife beater, and I'm like, oh. Gay people? And like, did not go well. But over time, you get used to it. You learn how to deal with it. You learn how to have conversations and see people, and you learn how to connect. And that's the biggest part of canvassing is learning how to connect. This is another human being, and these human beings don't just care about politics. They've had lives. Ask them where they're from. You know what I mean? Like, Tony, you grew up in Barrington, right?
Riverside.
Riverside. Good. Better than Barrington.
We
can share a hatred of Barrington.
I was trashed for doing that last week. No,
When I talk about
From Barrington in the room.
That's why I said it. When I talk about my history and my mother, oftentimes I'll be like, oh yeah, my mother was an immigrant too. I understand. And like talk about what that is. In my family, we have a joke. Growing up, you had 3 options in life. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, or a disappointment. I can't tell you how many times some other family members be like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Have fun, talk to these people and engage. And always just try and find ways to just talk about things. Like, oh, that's a cool garden gnome in your yard. You're also a Red Sox fan, that's nice. You also hate the Yankees, that's an even better bond. These are all things that work and help build a sense of you as a person, not just someone there to steal their vote.